Hi, glad you're here. This is Jennifer McGuire. So today we're taking shaker cards and stepping them up a bit to add what I call a little magic. Now the magic of these shaker cards is you have lots of sparklies inside that shake, but you also have a die cut or stamped image that moves around too without kind of going out of hand. It doesn't go upside down or get stuck. It stays there in the middle but shakes nicely. The best part about this is you can use whatever products you have. I think it's best to look at a completed card so you know what I'm talking about. On this card, we have the fish inside of our shaker window. And when we shake it, the fish moves around, but he doesn't get turned on his side or flip upside down. We'll do a little magic to make sure he stays in the middle and moves freely. After we do this design, I'll show you a few other variations in hopes that you'll find one that would work with products you have. Okay, let's get started. I'm using a hot foil plate and die for this card. However, you could use any stamped or die cut image. This one is from Trinity Stamps. I just thought it was beautiful. To do the foiling, I have my Glimmer machine from Spellbinders. It's warmed up and I put my hot foil plate onto the warm area. I then lay a pretty piece of foil pretty side down onto the foil plate, a piece of smooth cardstock, and then the two plates that come with the machine. I press the timer button, and when the timer button stops flashing, I take out all of those plates and platforms and run it through my die cut machine. This will apply the pressure to give us a beautiful foil image. If you're new to foiling, I will link to a video up here on the top right so you can learn more. If you have a different die cut machine, there are other foil machines that work great with whatever die cut machine you have. You'll just have to check with the manufacturer. So we have this beautiful holographic looking foil image, and I'm using the coordinating die to cut it out. Again, you don't have to do foiling here. You could do a stamped image, a shaped die cut, anything you want. And you'll see some other ideas throughout this video. I then added some quick coloring using my Copic Markers. I like the look of coloring a foil image. I try to stay off the foil, but you can color on the foil if you want to. You could do any type of coloring here. You could do watercolor, you could do just regular markers, whatever you have or enjoy using the most. Next, I have cut another die cut using the same die. Any cardstock will work. I use plain white. We're going to put strong double-sided tape directly down the middle of this die cut, so right from the top to the bottom. I'm using Lawn Fawn double-sided tape, and I'll use both of the widths that they offer, 1/8 of an inch and 1/4 of an inch in today's video. Use whatever double-sided or strong tape you have. I'm removing the release paper, and we have exposed adhesive right up the center of this die cut. Now for the magic, I like to use clear thread. You could use fishing twine, you could use dental floss, anything that's super fine that you won't see much. Clear is definitely the best option, but if you only have white thread, use that. Just use whatever you can that will be the least noticeable. So now I have placed the thread right into the adhesive. So the thread starts up at the top, off screen, and goes all the way to the bottom. And it's just pressed into that exposed adhesive. Now I'm using liquid adhesive to cover the rest of this die cut, so right around the edges. And then I will place our pretty colored die cut on top. So we will sandwich that thread in between. So now I can pick this up by that clear thread that's sticking out the top and the bottom of our die cuts, and you can see it spins freely. This is something that you could do on a card. You can make a spinner card this way, but instead I'm using that thread to kind of control the movement inside of the shaker card. Now let's do the background of our shaker card next. This is the Trinity Stamps Shimmering Sea hot foil plate. I'm taping it onto my white cardstock to create a hinge, flipping it up and adding our foil underneath it. This is a blue iridescent foil. I'll put that all onto my hot foil machine. We'll put the plates on top, press the timer button, let it run through the timing. Then we will take that all out and run it through our die cut machine. Foiling is a very easy process when you have a machine like this, but you could use background stamps here, you could use die cutting, whatever you want. All right, so now we have a little foil ocean background. I want this to cover the entire background though, so I will again use the same hot foil plate, create a little hinge on the bottom, flip it up to add the foil underneath, and then go through the foiling process again. So this way, the entire background of our shaker window will have the foil ocean. Really, if you want to see a closer look at foiling, check out that video that I'm linking up at the top right. I'm kind of going through it quickly here because we want to focus on the shaker card technique itself. Okay, so now our background is completely foiled, and I can cut this down to be 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. We can now add the shaker walls. We want to build up walls around it so everything will shake on the inside. I'm using the Waffle Flower Nesting Rectangle Frame die set. This set has different size frames that are great for creating shaker cards. I die cut 3 of them so far, and I'm gluing those together right onto our background. The outside dimension of this is 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. Now I like to build up my shaker walls with stacked frame die cuts. I feel like it gives the best results, but you could use foam tape if you prefer, or do an infinity shaker card, which I'll show in a future video. But here I'm gluing 3 stacked frames together. Now, if you do not have frame dies, you could use any 2 dies that are close in size and cut them together. So maybe 2 rectangle dies where one is a little bit bigger than the other. Cut them together and you can form a frame. You could also do circle, oval, whatever basic shape you have. Now it's time to add our fish into the shaker window. I'm putting double-sided tape right along the top of our frame, and I'll go ahead and put it on the other sides too. That way we'll be ready to add our next frame die cut when it's time to do so. But what we're going to do is tape that thread in place so that our fish stays kind of in the middle and doesn't kind of flip over or get stuck on the edge. So we're kind of controlling the movement with that clear thread. I'm removing the release paper from the top and the bottom edges only. So that's exposed adhesive. I will take the thread that's sticking out the top and place it right into that exposed adhesive. So you can see it stretched up there on the top, and I'll press it right onto the adhesive. And you can see the thread is hanging out the top. That's okay. We'll cut it off later. Now the thread on the bottom, I want this to be loose. So I'm putting a little slack in that thread and then pressing it down into the exposed adhesive on the bottom. Notice how that thread there is very loose. We don't want it to be tight here. So it's kind of curled up in there. It doesn't matter. No one sees it. Now I can remove the release paper from the adhesive on the left and the right also, and take another frame die cut and put it on top, sandwiching that thread up at the top and up at the bottom. So now this fish can move around in there, but I didn't give it so much freedom with that thread that it can flip around or get stuck on the sides. After trimming the extra thread that's hanging out the top and the bottom, I'm adding another die cut frame. You do not have to do this many layers of frame die cuts. I just like my shaker windows to be thick, so there's a lot of movement. You could definitely do less stacking if you want to. Totally up to you. We can now do the front of our shaker card window. I have die cut a frame from blue cardstock, and I'm putting double-sided tape around the back edges of it. I also have a piece of acetate. You can use absolutely any kind of clear packaging for this. Use something that you've recycled. If you do not have anything, you could also use any kind of acetate that craft companies sell. I really like the Simon Says Stamp heat resistant acetate, and you'll see me use it with foiling later. It's just nice and thick and holds up against heat in case you want to foil or do heat embossing on it. Here I'm just leaving it plain. So after I put the acetate on the back of this blue frame, I'm adding more double-sided tape around the edge so that this will be ready to go to add on top of our shaker window. But first we need to add some goodies onto the inside of this. Now for the movement, I really like to use the Trinity stamps, Shimmer and Shine Confetti. These are very flat, iridescent little circles that are just great on all shaker cards. However, you could use whatever you want to add movement in there. When I do shaker cards, I usually like to glue a few embellishments to the background. The reason I do this is when you stand your shaker card up, all of the shaker bits will all fall to the bottom. I like to have some sparkles that stay up in the background. So that's what I'm gluing on here. These are Trinity Stamps dewdrops, and I thought they looked like little bubbles. I really like the dewdrops. They come in lots of different colors. They're my new favorite to add to cards. Perfectly round with a touch of color and shine. So once I've added those in and they've dried, it's time to sprinkle in our confetti. You can add as much as you want to this. It really doesn't matter. And again, you could use different sequins, beads, gems, whatever you want. I like these because they match pretty much any card, and I think I used them on all of today's cards. Now we can take this frame that has the adhesive on the back and add it right over our shaker window, closing everything in on it. Once we're done, we can shake this and notice that the fish can move around, but he's not going to try to flip or get stuck up against the edge because we added the control with that loose piece of clear thread. For a sentiment, I chose one from the Trinity Stamps Well Done stamp set, which I'll use a little bit later in this video. I stamped it with black ink on white cardstock and used the coordinating die to cut it out. Now this says an ocean of thanks, and I know this is a betta fish, but I just kind of went with it. It looks like a magical fish to me, so I just decided to go with the ocean sentiment. So after adding that, with the help of a T-roller to make sure it's straight, I added our entire shaker card onto a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch top folding white note card. Because I build up so much dimension in the thickness of these walls, it's a pretty thick card. You can make it thinner if you want, but when I have a thick card like this, I like to use a bigger envelope. This blue envelope is an A2, which I normally would use, but that white one is an A6, which is slightly bigger. So if you make a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch card with lots of dimension, you could use this slightly bigger envelope to hold it. And I'll link to A6 envelopes below. Now here you can see the movement that we have. We have all those sparkles that move around freely and the fish that kind of wiggles and swims around in the middle. But he won't try to flip over or get stuck on the sides. Another good thing is our fish won't sink to the bottom of the card either. So using that little step of adding that clear thread makes a big difference, especially when you have smaller images that you want to kind of keep towards the top of the card, which I will show you later on. All right, so let's do another example. With this one, I added some foiling to the acetate on the front and some color to the acetate. This is a fun way to step up any type of shaker card. And again, we'll use that clear thread to help add a bit of magic. All right, I'm using that same hot foil plate and using the blue color foil. But this time, instead of foiling on cardstock, we're foiling on acetate. I'm using Simon Says Stamp Heat Resistant Acetate. You can foil on this beautifully. So I place the foil face side down onto our hot foil plate, and I'm putting our piece of acetate right on top, and I'll do the foiling process just like we would with cardstock. I thought it'd be fun to also add some color to the acetate behind these waves. So I flipped my acetate over, and on the back I'm just using a Copic marker to pull color back and forth, side to side, kind of mimicking that wave look. Now you can use any permanent marker here. You could use Sharpies, Copic markers, whatever you may have. You could also use alcohol inks to do this. And I'm just going back and forth, side to side, in kind of a wave motion. I do recommend using a darker color than you want to end up with because the color goes down lighter on the acetate. And when you flip it over, you have the beautiful blue foil with the blue color behind it. Now this time I'm starting with the front of our shaker card, the acetate window, and I just wanted to have this ready so we can plan our card around it. I used one of those large die cut frames from Waffle Flower. Again, it's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches. I put double-sided tape on the back of it, and I'll place it right onto the area of the acetate that I want. I then can use my scissors to trim off all the excess that hangs out the outside. For the inside of my shaker window, I'm again using the Trinity Stamps Well Done stamp set. Now when I make a cute card, I am a sucker for punny sentiments, and this set has lots of them for lots of occasions. And I like that the whale is cute and easy to color. So in here you've got I whaley miss you, welcome to the world little one, sometimes life is overwhelming. I mean, every occasion there's a punny sentiment. So I stamped the whale, colored him and die cut him out. Then I used the die to cut another solid white die cut. Along the back of our whale, I'm putting a piece of the double-sided tape straight up and down, just like we did on the last card. I'll remove the release paper, put a piece of clear thread right through that. Again, use whatever thin string you may have. The clear is great because you don't see it inside the shaker card, but even white would be fine. Now we'll put more adhesive all around this and then put the other die cut right on top so that the clear thread is sandwiched nicely between. You could just use a piece of Scotch tape to tape the thread on the back, but I do find having the smooth die cut on the back does result in better shaking when you make the card. Off screen, I created the rest of our shaker window. This is a piece of white cardstock that is 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches with 2 white die cut frames glued to the front of it, just like we did on our first example. But here I'm going to stop and add some stamping inside of that window. I probably should have done this earlier before I glued the frames on, but I didn't think of it, so I'll just add the stamping now. First, I decided to add some fish in the water. This is from the Trinity Stamps birthday shark stamp set, which also would be a fun image to have in a shaker card. But here I'm just stamping the little fish below the water line, just doing some quick basic stamping in a subtle ink. And this will be covered by a lot of the shaker stuff, but I thought it would be fun to add anyway. Now at this point, I didn't think of the clouds. We'll add those in a moment, but I do have a piece of double-sided tape along the top and along the bottom of our frame so that we can add that clear thread from our whale. So here we have our whale, and I'm pressing the top thread right into the double-sided tape on the top of the frame. So this you want to be kind of stretched up there so that when the card stands up, the whale's in this position. But the piece on the bottom, the thread on the bottom, you kind of loop a little bit, give it a little slack so that this can move around freely. Now it's time to put some more adhesive around the little pieces of double-sided tape we already have. I like to use liquid adhesive when I can. This is Gina K Connect liquid adhesive. I find it to be cost-effective and great because you can wiggle things in place. Now right on top of that, I'm putting another frame. This will sandwich that clear thread between. So you have the thread coming out the top, the thread coming out the bottom, and we'll just trim that off with scissors. And because I put a little slack in the thread at the bottom, you can see how he can move around freely. It was at this point I decided to add some clouds in the sky. So I'm using the new Trinity Stamps Up, Up, Away Gnome stamp set. They have so many adorable gnome stamp sets. I think this little guy is so cute. He would be fun in a shaker window too, using the thread to kind of control him, and he could move around. Didn't have time to get to that, but I'm using the clouds from this on this card and the happy birthday later on. So I just moved the whale over there as much as I could and stamped the clouds around him. And I'm just stamping with a light blue ink. I don't want anything that will distract from the card. Now, I know that I should have done this background stamping before adding all this on, but this just shows you that when you watch a video, we don't always follow smooth steps from beginning to end. We change our mind and add things as we go too. I also wanted some birds in the sky and was too lazy to get out any bird stamps, so I'm just using a black pen to create 3. Very simple. Now we can add our little goodies to the inside. I'm once again using those Shimmer and Shine confetti. I like these because they're iridescent, match everything, and are nice and flat, so you don't have to make your shaker card super thick if you don't want to. I decided not to add anything else in there, just that one type of confetti. I flipped our acetate front over and put double-sided tape around the outside edge, and now can lay this piece right onto our shaker window, trapping everything inside. At this point, I thought the white frame was a little boring, so I decided to add a bright blue frame on top just so that the whale would pop even more. So now we have that whale trapped inside, and because of the thread, he won't flip over, he won't sink to the bottom, he'll stay nice there in the middle, floating on the water. I added the shaker window to a card of the same size, which is 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. I also added a sentiment right onto the front of the window. I stamped it and die cut it using that same Whale Done stamp set. Here's a closer look at the stamping on the inside, the foiling on the acetate, the little sparkles in the bottom, and our whale that moves around just right in the middle. The little magic of using that clear tape can make a big difference in creating a shaker card with a large element that moves in the center. You can also use this technique with smaller images and to make smaller shaker windows. On this card, I use the new Trinity Stamps Friendship stamp set. There are some great punny sentiments in here too. And I like that the coordinating dies that are available also cut out the sentiments, not just the images. This time I used a smaller frame die to create a bunch of smaller frames, as you see here, from white cardstock. I also was smart and this time remembered to stamp my clouds first on the background. So you can see I stamped 3 clouds from that Gnome stamp set with light blue ink. And now I'm gluing some frames directly onto that and trimming off the excess. So I have 2 or 3 frames glued down on the background, so we're starting to build the walls of our shaker card. I also stamped, colored, and die cut a sailboat and die cut an additional solid die cut. I put tape right down the center of that extra die cut, right from the top to the bottom. I have a piece of clear thread that I'm laying right into that exposed adhesive, then putting the other die cut right on top to sandwich it between, and you can see the clear thread sticking out the top and the bottom. All right, so we can add this into our shaker window. I'm putting double-sided tape right along the top and double-sided tape right along the bottom. So this time I just put the tape on top of the thread, held the thread where I want it, and put the tape on top. It doesn't matter as long as you have a little slack to the thread underneath your moving element. Then I can put more adhesive all the way around the top of that frame and put another frame die cut on top to sandwich that thread between. So again, the thread is kind of tight at the top, but it's loose on the bottom, which gives you that movement and keeps the sailboat from sinking to the bottom of our little ocean. For the shaker window itself, I did the same technique I did on the last one. I foiled on acetate and put color on the back with a Copic marker. I again have another frame die cut, putting double-sided tape on the back of that, and I'll place that onto the area of the acetate that I'd like to frame. I then can again trim off all the excess. And another reminder, you can build your shaker card however you want, whether you like using an infinity shaker, you like to do double-sided foam tape on the walls, whatever works for you, you can do this technique with the thread going through the image, connecting the top and the bottom loosely so that it can shake around on the inside. I thought the same shimmer and shine confetti would be great inside this one too. Putting a lot less in this one since it's a smaller window, but you can put in as much as you want. By the way, Trinity Stamps has loads of confettis and pearls and gems and sequins and anything you could possibly want to put in a shaker window. I encourage you to check out their selection. I think it's the biggest that I've been able to find from a craft company. All right, I put adhesive on the back of our front window, line that right up on top of the shaker window, press everything down nicely, and then test it out. You'll see that your boat will move around and sail back and forth, but it won't sink and it won't flip over thanks to using that thread. All right, now I added that little shaker window to a blue note card that is 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches, and I white heat embossed Let's Celebrate underneath it. The blue cardstock I used to make this note card is a bit lighter weight, so I am gluing 2 pieces of white cardstock to the inside. This will make my note card base stronger, especially since we have something heavy glued to the front. However, I do this a lot when I use a lighter weight cardstock because nobody likes a floppy card. All right, here is the completed card. You can see the foiling on the front, the blue ocean that we colored the acetate. We have the little shaker bits on the inside and our boat that moves around without sinking or flipping over. Just adding that little bit of thread can make a big difference. Okay, for our next example, we're stepping it up and having 3 elements that move and shake around inside of the window. In this case, I have 3 foiled balloons. To create these foil balloons, I again use my Glimmer machine along with the Trinity Stamps Party Balloons foil plates and die set. So you get these balloon hot foil plates and then coordinating dies to cut them out. I put this down on my Glimmer machine and then I used a rainbow foil over it onto white cardstock. Now I mentioned there are dies to cut out these balloons. However, I decided to use a different set of dies. These cut very close instead of leaving a white trim. Now the die set that I used is also from Trinity Stamps. It's a stacking die set, so it has lots of different balloon sizes and shapes. And some of them happen to line up very close and tight with these hot foil plates. Because they line up so closely, you can't look through the die to line it up. So what I do is I die cut from scrap paper, line up the negative space of the die cut right around our foil balloon, as you see me doing here, and I'll just tape it in place. Then I can pop the die into the opening, tape it in place, and run it through my die cut machine. This way I can be sure that the die is lined up with the foiled balloon. And I will do the same with all of our foil balloons. This time I'm making a bigger card. It will be 5 by 7 in the end. So for the shaker window on the front, I cut a piece of cardstock that is 4 3/4 inches by 6 3/4 inches, just a little bit smaller than a 5x7 card. I then used a smaller rectangle die to cut the opening to create a frame. I didn't have large frame dies, so instead I used a rectangle and cut from the center of a rectangle piece of cardstock. And I did that repeatedly to create lots of frames of the same size. By the way, the die set that has the single rectangle dies big enough for a 5x7 card is also from Waffle Flower. I have that linked below. Okay, so I have a piece of white cardstock that is 4 3/4 inches by 6 3/4 inches. And I'm gluing 2 or 3 of these frames right on top. Again, this will be a little bit smaller than our 5x7 card, so we'll see a little bit of the note card around the outside edge with this particular card design. Since I will have 3 foil balloons on the inside, I decided not to add any stamping to this, just to keep everything plain white in the background so our balloons and our confetti stand out. Now here I'm putting that double-sided tape right down the center from top to bottom of our die cuts. This time we have 3 balloons of 3 different sizes that we will connect inside of our shaker window with that clear thread. So after I put the tape down the center of each, I can lay the thread onto it, doing it a little different this time. This time I'll have the clear thread only come out the top of the balloon. So here I'll cut a piece of clear thread and put one end of it towards the top of the balloon so that it's pressed into that adhesive. So there's no clear thread hanging out the bottom of the balloon. And I'll do this on all 3. The reason I'm only putting clear thread coming out the top is I want a gold thread coming out the bottom. Think about it. These are balloons, and it's nice to have a balloon string on it. So I'll do a gold thread coming out the bottom, and that will look like the string attached to the balloon. So here's a piece of gold thread, and I'll place it onto that adhesive on the back once again and just have it hanging out the bottom. So now this balloon has clear thread hanging out the top and gold thread hanging out the bottom. This gold thread is very thin. That's the look I wanted to go for. You could do something thicker if you want it to show up more in your little shaker window. Totally up to you. So I'll add that gold thread coming out the bottom of each of these balloons. The last step on the balloons is to add the extra die cut of the same size to the back. So this way our threads are sandwiched between. So we have the clear thread coming out the top, the gold thread coming out the bottom, and we'll do the same with all 3. I do like to put something heavy on top just to make sure everything is sandwiched nicely and holds tight. I have a sample countertop that I use as a paperweight, but anything heavy would work. All right, now we can assemble our shaker card. The rest of it is pretty simple. It's the same thing we've done, but we have 3 elements to have shaking around instead of just 1. So I'm putting double-sided tape along the top and the bottom of our frames. I will put the balloon towards the top center, the biggest balloon, and press the clear thread in the adhesive up there. Then the gold thread I'm just leaving down towards the bottom. We'll press it in later. Now this balloon I want to be about here, so I stretch that clear thread up and press it into that adhesive up there on the top. Then I will do the same thing with the 3rd balloon, but on the right. Stretch that clear thread up, press it into the exposed adhesive, and now we can add our strings to the bottom. Now these we want to be a little loose, so you see me kind of wiggle it so there's a little bit of slack on each of these gold threads. This will allow it to move around, but when we stand our card up, the balloons won't sink to the bottom. So I'll put more adhesive around the rest of the frame and lay another die cut frame on top, and then we can trim off all of the string that's hanging out the top and the bottom. If you wanted to save time with this card, you could make a smaller one and just do 1 large balloon in the center and have the same kind of movement. But I think it's really cool to have the gold thread on the bottom and then the clear thread that the recipient won't see that holds those balloons in place and keeps them from sinking to the bottom of the card or flipping over. I am using liquid adhesive to add some white clear dewdrops to the background. These will stay in place and not fall to the bottom when the card stands up. But also I can use these to kind of tape some of that clear thread in place if I don't want it to move as much. Like this balloon here has a really long clear thread at the top. If I don't want it to go too far to the left, I will just use a little gem to glue that thread and keep it from moving as much. You could totally skip this if you wanted to, but I was adding these gemstones anyway. All right, I have one last frame and I'm laying a piece of acetate onto it. This will be the front of our shaker window. I will then put more double-sided tape around the edges of that and lay this right on top of our shaker window. But first we have to add whatever we want to have move around on the inside. Now this time I'm using Trinity Stamps Oh My Stars. I've used these a lot in videos. They're silver with an incredible amount of sparkle. They even have gold stars now too. So I put lots of those in there, and then I'm also adding some of the same Shimmer and Shine confetti because those seem to work really well here. After I added the window onto the front, I did put all of this onto a 5x7 dark bluish purple note card, so you can see that little trim around the outside edge. And I put a solid piece of white cardstock in the inside to write a personal message. The happy birthday sentiment that is stamped and die cut on the front of the shaker window is from that Up, Up, and Away Gnome stamp set that I showed you earlier that also has the clouds. So here you can see how all the bits kind of fall to the bottom, but you have lots of movement in there. The balloons move around freely, but they don't flip over or sink to the bottom, thanks to that clear thread. I thought this was a really fun way to use this technique, so you have those balloons shaking around along with all the sequins. Now before we go, I just wanted to show you a card that I made that has absolutely nothing to do with this video. It's just part of this new Trinity Stamps release that I'm using. This is a cupcake shaped card, and there's a die set that cuts all of these pieces, so you could create this actually very quickly. I will link to the die set below. I'm not showing you it in this video because this video is long enough as is, but if you'd like to see a video where I show how to put it together, let me know and I can try to put that up. But in the meantime, I'll link to the die set below. And I was making this for one of Lila's friends, and she was over the moon when she opened it because, you know, it's not every day a kid gets a shaped card because most cards at Hallmark are rectangles. All right, anyway, thank you for watching this video. I hope that by showing you several different magic shaker cards that you'll be able to use some supplies you have to create one of your own. If you want to know about what I use, it is linked below in my YouTube description. At the end here, I'll link to a couple other related videos, including another that shows a similar technique. Thanks for watching. Have a wonderful week. See you soon.